Thank you, Danella. So I'm excited to be here. I mean, I was teasing. I left my husband and 3 children behind, and I keep Skyping with them. And I says, "Can we move here?" And then, "Mom, you can't. We can't leave. You can't leave us anymore because you want to move all places. Every time you go, you leave us. You want to move somewhere new. So we can't keep it anymore." But it is a beautiful country. It's my first time here, so we're excited. I brought my friend Molly. We went to doctoral school together. And we've been traveling and seeing some things. The caves, we went there 2 days ago. It was a pretty significant experience of us, like a memorable one. But I'm here to present some research, as Danella said, about computational thinking. And I understand that New Zealand, in the context of computational thinking and digital literacy, you're also under the governmental as far as thinking about how to embed that design into K-12 schools, right, curriculum. I don't know, I'm not really familiar with where you are in your curriculum, but I'm speaking in the context of U.S. and the data has been gathered here with the research in U.S. system. And so our system's a little bit differently, and I'll talk a little bit about that with the background and the literature and the findings as we move through the presentation. I'm going to also talk about some implications of where I think we're going to move forward with where we're at now with the U.S. current system. And then I'll leave some space at the end for some questions and answers or maybe some comments that you want to ask. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the background, so if you're familiar with the research with computational thinking and then computer science or coding, in the context of U.S., a lot of parents really want their kids, they surveyed this. CTSA is a Computer Science Teacher Association that we have as a organization. We have national organizations for pretty much everything in U.S. So CSTA is one for computer science. And so they surveyed parents, and parents really believe that because of the STEM growth and the job and filling up the pipeline, they really want their students to learn computer science in the schools. However, in the U.S., only 1 out of 4 schools actually teach it. But the problem is a lot of the saturation happens at secondary school. So secondary for us is anywhere from 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. If you are in a system or in a school district that benefits and actually provides a computer science class. So then you notice how there's a huge gap. So a lot of parents want it, but the reality is there's not enough resources, just like maybe New Zealand in the context of your schools here, whatever resources that you have and be able to infuse that. In our secondary places, there are some schools that allow that to happen, but most of it is saturated only in secondary, meaning 9, 10, 11, 12. So we already know that majority of schools don't teach computer science. And the literature already says that back in 1983, a lot of this happened around No Child Left Behind, which was a huge legislation back in U.S. With the whole Sputnik era and technology, and everything was kind of pushing forward the whole historical places of how technology became infused into curriculum to keep up with other counterparts, other players in the world, to make us more global. And then the PISA studies, you're probably familiar with your own students taking the PISA exam and the TIMMS exams. So based on those findings, U.S. has now looked at and said, okay, and then the National Research Council, our students are falling behind in the U.S. We rank 34th, way at the bottom. So computer science became really a priority into not only STEM education. STEM education obviously picked up a lot of momentum in the last 5 to 10 years, and now in the last several years, CS and computer science and coding, computational thinking has even picked up a lot more momentum. One of it is because U.S. initiatives to keep up back in the Sputnik, but also because of STEM growth and the global economy that we've become. So all this literature, and we have a lot of funding and grant mechanisms back in the U.S. with CS for All. It's a new initiative, meaning they really believe CS should be for all students, not just secondary, because it's been saturated predominantly in the secondary space. I did it only in elementary because I felt there was a huge need. And then obviously STEM plus C, these are all national governmental funded researchers who receive a number of grants. And then Code.org and Google, they have funded not only private and nonprofit, but public agencies so that schools and teachers are getting professional development so that they're infusing that into their classrooms across the K-12 platform first before they go into college or at university, post-secondary education to pursue STEM and CS majors. We've also have this happened pretty in the last 2 years, the K-12 national standards for NGSS. Those are their science standards. They've gone through a complete revision, and they've been adopted in the last 3 years. In every single school, a public school entity, those are our national science standards. But within the national science standards, there's engineering design. So if you're familiar with engineering design, there's a lot of computational pieces of part of the engineering space that's embedded into the national science standards. And then the Common Core is basically their math and their literacy that all teachers are expected to teach based on our national curriculum. So those are national standards. And then now we have a new K-12 CS framework, and certain researchers, a task force is working on the K-12 CS standards to make it as part of a K-12, and all teachers are expected to teach it as well. And then right now we're under the development that just happened last fall. They developed a AP computer science course for high school students, and that picked up a lot of momentum and a lot of priority as far as we need to get our high school students not to only participate in computer science classes, but also to prepare them well, so in an AP exam. And so we had a lot of students, that was their first year last year when they built it, and then in the spring of last year in 2017 was in their first year when they redesigned and rebuilt the computer science AP course. And so, I mean, we all know that this is all because of inclusion, of STEM, and filling up the pipeline with the growth. So my literature review, basically the background is presented there. There's a lot of literature, as you would imagine. U.S. is not in this, a lot of these are U.S. researchers, but they also come international field too. So the computational world has always felt really, computational thinking is something that is really important, and it should be infused as part of every single core content. And of course, in the secondary world, we used to think that computer science should only be available to older students or secondary students because they're available, they have the capacity and the mental capacity and the mind. However, there's been studies that has been done for early childhood being, younger than 8. Early childhood in the U.S. is actually a 0 to 8 span. That's when we consider early childhood. And then upper elementary, anything from 8 till, our upper elementary space is till about 10 or 11. And so all these studies were done in the last 10 years on young students and their capability to be able to learn computer science and coding. Some were really small intervention programs. Some was actually real platforms and coding, visual, textual-based platforms. And so basically they're saying with this research that CS opportunities, if available and students can experience at a young age, it does them wonders as far as building problem-solving skills, building further cognitive skills, being able to have that experience to kind of discuss and problem solve together with other children of their age. And they could develop sequencing skills, which happens, we all know sequencing happens in math, but their sequencing skills will improve if they're provided opportunities to be able to understand, dissect, and have chances in the classroom to think about coding and think about computer science opportunities. And then obviously Jeanette Wing is, she was really seminal in this whole work with computational thinking for everyone. She works for Microsoft now, but at that point she really believed that computational thinking should be across everything that students do, meaning reading, writing, arithmetic, all their foundational skills. And so that really jump-started a lot of the CS and CT world in the States as far as her seminal work in CT should be for everybody. Because it cuts across every single domain and everything that we do in the world. It's not just based on science, and it only should fit one science core curriculum or one math or one engineering. It really should fit every single curricular component and design because it happens in everything that we do in real life and in the classroom. And so basically the CS literature says that as we feel the pipeline, not just for STEM and growth, but this undercurrent of really CS should be for everybody because it's building computational thinking, and computational thinking is just not about coding or knowing how to do Java and Python and all those different things that a computer be able, but it's about this problem-solving skills, and the idea of computational thinking is really powerful work because it allows students to build that mental capacity to challenge, to inquire, and to be able to dialogue. And so basically there's lots of benefits on why CT should be for everyone. And so that's how I kind of started this work with computational thinking in the elementary space, because at that time in Oregon, there was actually a gap. Nobody was doing elementary as far as like researching it for elementary students. There was a lot of money funded for secondary world, like building the AP science course and secondary after-school programs and all that stuff. But I really felt like there was a need. One of it was, it really became something more of an inspiration from my own children. I have all girls, and some of this pipeline is also to think about increased representation for minorities and people of color and women. And so my girls at the time, because I was sending them to school, they really they were challenged, but they were really bored. And so at that time, we started putting them on a platform at home to think about computer science, and they became more and more engaged over time. And I felt, wow, my kids are doing this at a really young age. Remember that literature that says kids, if they're exposed and they have the experience, they could do it. They just need to be given those opportunities. And in front of my mind, I realized my kids only get this because they have access. And access became, because my background is in equity work, I really felt like every single student really needed to have that opportunity. So then I started going to the elementary space and meeting with principals and saying, we need to take this into the elementary, not an after-school program, not a before-school program, because it has limitations on who can participate, but rather an equity work where it has to be in school, during school time, et cetera. And a lot of the questions that I was asking was, how does this influence elementary school, like their primary, what they're learning? Like, does it influence their computational thinking from before and post intervention? Does it build their STEM aspirations? And because we also know that college and career choices, when students pick STEM majors, they probably had experience in the past that pursued them, or parents that push them. There's literature that says if parents have a financial influence on what kids choose in their jobs. So that's true in the literature, but then what happens, how can control environments in the classroom, like teachers and experiences, also influence STEM aspirations and growth? So in building the research question and also in building the design of the intervention model and the program, my background's in early childhood as well, and so I really felt with Kolb's theory as an early childhood developmentalist that kids, you know, I taught in the K-12 space and was an administrator for a number of years before I transitioned into post-secondary. And in my work with teaching and curriculum design and thinking about how kids best learn, I really felt that this model really informed a lot of the work that I was doing as far as building the intervention. So in Kolb, you think, and I just kind of bolded it out for you because it might be hard to see the arrows. And so basically, Kolb says, concrete experience. Kids need to feel what they're learning. And that could be relevant as far as, oh, I could relate. We already know, right, from literature, there's Dewey, there's relevant experiences. So they need to feel, maybe connect to those relevant experiences on what they're learning. And then watching, reflective observation, very Vygotsky, right? Like, how do you watch and observe and be socially constructed in these areas and be able to watch others? Because we also know that kids, we are people-oriented. We're social beings, so we like to watch and we learn from either our role models or however. So they also have to watch, and then from that, with any kind of new concept, they have to be able to be given the opportunity to think about it. And so that's the abstract conceptualization that happens when they're learning anything new. And then from there, then they have to experience it, and that's where the doing happens. So with a new concept, so new being computer science and coding, as I'm bringing it into the elementary space, how would I design an intervention program that had these series of lessons that would take them through this continuing of they have to feel, they have to watch, they have to think, and then now they have to do. So I really took that model into my own work as far as now I'm going to start building this intervention. So in the intervention model, what I did was taking from Kolb's framework of how kids best learn in new experience or any kind of new topic, I thought about the intervention, and I was only given enough space for, I mean, obviously we could have been there for a lot longer for the entire academic year, but during the pilot, I picked 10 concepts. In meeting with principals and curriculum design, you know, we decided that we were going to do it in a fall semester and be able to have enough data. So in the spring, we would collate the data and analyze the data. So the intervention happened only in our fall semester, and our fall semesters happen usually from September to December. And so it was 10 weeks, and then I used Kolb's theory. And then from there, I had to kind of think about who do I want this structured for, like the population of the students. So we picked third grade. A lot of it was because I felt third grade was a fitting place for them because a lot of them, you know, by third grade, they're usually 8 or 9 years old. They already have some foundational literacy skills. They already know a little bit about foundational sequencing, adding and subtracting. So they already have some of those basics that we think about in pre-primary and primary schools. So I targeted third grade, or, you know, in New Zealand world, I'm guessing 8, 9 years old, level 3. And then we did a hybrid lesson each week under the 10-week intervention. So the hybrid lesson consisted of 1 hour, and within the 1 hour, we planned 30 minutes of structured activities, because in New Zealand at that time, I had read literature on CS Unplugged, and they really believe, right, like Bell, and they really believe that you can teach computer science without ever touching the computer. So then I started pulling work from how did they build a unit as far as CS and plug, and thinking about if we can teach computer science and these concepts without ever touching a computer, then there has to be some hybridity of what's going to happen in the intervention. So within the intervention, we did an hour of lessons, 30 minutes, about 20, 30 minutes of structured activities that were completely hands-on. They never touched a computer or a tablet or any of that stuff. And then the last 20 to 30 minutes was actually, that was the doing part. They learned, they felt, they experienced, and then the last 20 to 30 minutes was they actually did something with what they learned, which was the whole experience part. And that was the online platform where they moved from the space of hands-on, and then they applied it to the online space. And the online space, we actually adapted and utilized a lot of materials from the Code.org platform, which was already in construction and doing a lot of iterations of the elementary modules of what was going to happen in their courses. And so that's how we did, and then the content was very interdisciplinary as far as when it was taught. Some teachers picked, I want to use some of my science time for this. Some teachers said, I have a block of intervention. You can come in and make sure it's connected to something they're learning in math. And we made that very explicit that whatever they were learning in literature or the other fields, the teachers that were there, the classroom teachers, also was taking the concepts and actually making it a very interdisciplinary. As the 1 hour happened, it would leave, right? And so the other 8 hours that they had, they were taking the interdisciplinary content and connected to the other subjects that the students were learning. So these are just typical research questions that I asked as I explored the model. What changes are evident in the third grade students' CS as they specific CS lessons over time, and then how does that influence their computational thinking? Because basically that's the whole aspect of computational thinking. If kids are getting this, how does it influence their CT skills? And then finally, is this intervention program helping or influence or anything? What are their aspirations as far as STEM is concerned? Does it change and shift their attitudes towards future STEM aspirations and growth? As a researcher, we always have data and methods, and how do we collect our data and how do we analyze it. So I basically, I'm a mixed method person, so I always do quantitative and qualitative. My quantitative was all built on a pre and post assessment that I built for the CT assessment, where students took a pre-test before the intervention model of the 10 weeks, and then after the 10-week intervention, they took a post-test, the same post-test. So that was the quantitative portion. The other quantitative portion was a STEM survey that I had redesigned. I adapted from an Aspire's instrument, which was other researchers had done for more middle and secondary students on their perceptions of engineering and STEM. And so since I was investigating early, I had to kind of adapt the language and the content to make it more fitting, developmentally appropriate for elementary school students. So I did the STEM survey on a 44 construct Likert scale, and I'll give you an example of some of the questions that I asked in the STEM survey. It was also a pre and a post model. And then I went in and asked questions. We did some interviewing with the students. I had 52 students who participated in some random selection, so that was about 4 to 5 kids per classroom. The first year of this data collection, we had about 15 classrooms. So, you do your math. We had 52 students who were randomly selected for semi-structured interviews. And then students who were participated in the entire 10-week intervention, the first, second, and third year, did a different, it was up to the teacher on what they were using as a formative assessment besides the CT assessment and the STEM survey. So some teachers decided that they were going to do some flip books with the students on what they were learning with vocabulary, with the concepts. Some teachers decided that they were going to do writing reflections, like after each lesson, students were going to reflect and write on what they learned. Some decided that they were just going to do exit tickets out, and they collected that. And then that was a part of my also data collection method. I left it up to the classroom teacher and the people teaching the concepts to decide on what formative assessment piece they were going to use with the students in the classroom. So here's my sample CT assessment. These are some questions that we asked in the pre and post test. I apologize if you can't see it, but basically the students were asked to put these mixed up instructions for baking a cake in order using only 4 steps. In the CT assessment, there were 10 questions. 5 of those questions were related to sequencing, algorithm, looping. These are coding concepts. Looping, conditionals, and events. And then this one is obviously a sequencing. We had to, in the teaching of the actual concepts, the pre-service teachers are the one teaching the concepts. What they were doing was they were trying to connect these experiences and make it relevant to both girls and boys. I mean, you have to know your population. Baking cake and mixing at early 8, 9 is very familiar to them. So we had that as a question, and then Emma's exercising before gym class. This is a looping question. Emma does 2 push-ups. Emma repeats the first step 3 times and touches her toes once after each repeat. How many push-ups did Emma do? So this was a pre and a post, and then during the intervention period, obviously they were taught loops, and then they take this test later at the end of the intervention period. So these are just 2 of the 10 questions on the assessment. The other assessment that I did, the pre and post, was the STEM survey. This also happened pre and post intervention, and these were the questions we were asking the students. They completed it completely online. They had their little Google Chromebooks out before the intervention ever happened. The classroom teachers helped facilitate that, and they just logged in with an online thing, and they were able to complete, and they just kind of clicked on from a Likert scale from 1 to 5 as far as strongly agree or agree. So I'm good with technology, so I wanted to explore their concepts and their perceptions, their aspirations in STEM, what they thought about themselves, are there parental influences, are there peer influences, et cetera. So these are just some questions that I learned things quickly in math lessons, I learned things quickly in technology lessons. Other things about learning for STEM for later, I really wanted to know is what they're learning. Remember, because it was an intervention period with CS design, are any of these things influencing what they want to pursue later in life? So studying science is useful for getting a job in the future, et cetera. And then I wanted to know an example of a parent attitude. My parents think it's important for me to learn about math, science, et cetera. So those are the questions, and it was easy for them because they just clicked strongly agree, obviously disagree to strongly agree, and it was on a Likert scale of 1 through 5. And here are some interview questions that I asked the students. Basically, what do you enjoy? I had to build some kind of relationship. They saw me. I was going into those 15 classrooms I wouldn't say every single week for each classroom because, I don't have that time, and the schools are pretty spread out across the district. But I did go in there. They saw me as far as somebody familiar, but they were excited to kind of share what they were learning. And so I did a lot of semi-structured interviews with them, and so I had to kind of build a relationship. I really wanted to know what are some things they enjoy doing, because you had to kind of connect. And, you ask 7, 8-year high school, good, fine. They were very short in their responses. And so I really wanted them to elaborate, tell me more, and as a researcher, you have to find the balance of when do you stop asking because they're just going to keep giving you one short responses. And so in order to connect with them, I really felt it was really important to find out what they like to do and find out whatever it is that they like to do is connected to what they're learning at school. And if it's connected to what they're learning at school, can they make any connections from that based on a computational thinking aspect? So I asked, what do you want to do when you grow up? What are you learning in coding? Lots of these questions. Do you think these lessons are important? And a lot of times I found, students liked, I like soccer. And I'm like, oh, do you think soccer is important in what? So tell me what you're learning in coding. And then they'll say, oh, I learned this. So is that connected to soccer? And at first they'll say no. And then I say, well, you told me that then, of course you have to keep prompting them. And then they're able to actually start making those connections on their own. But it involves a couple of prompts and things. And then my demographics for the students that I was fielding was in 2 districts. We were in mostly one district where we had about 10 classrooms, and the other one we had about 5. And so these are the demographics. Remember, when I built the intervention, I really felt like access was important. My background in ESOL with students from non-native English backgrounds really played a part in what I was doing as well. And students from disabilities, because if CT is meant for all, then we can't leave students who have a learning disability, students who have a different language. They also need to benefit from computational thinking. Really, if we all believe that is an important, everybody has a goal, right? We all want that goal, which is CT, for them to build extensive problem-solving skills, extensive cognitive domain, then it should be available to all students. So I really picked districts that I felt had a true representation of students from all kinds of different walks of life. Students who didn't have access, the eco-dis, meaning if they get coding, it might because of access based on financial. Remember, I felt like my kids had access because I was able to put them on a network at home. We had that access to technology, and my husband had a background in computer science. But what about the students who never are given those opportunities? So going into classrooms with eco-dis and districts and some representation of English language learners, students with disability, et cetera. We had a hard time getting, well, this was the first year demographic. By the third year, which was this past year, we had much more of a larger representation of English learners and minority students. So the analysis happened from the pre and post tests, computational thinking, the pre and post tests from the STEM survey, the different interviews that I had, and then all the qualitative narratives, the reflections, the flip books, all the stuff that the students were using in the classroom, each lesson as a formative assessment, and trying to analyze all that data. Some schools are fortunate enough they have a research assistant. I did it all by myself, and so I'm still doing data analysis. I'm able to analyze what I can analyze in small doses, but I work predominantly at a teaching university, and so I also teach full time at the same time as trying to research. So finding that balance is interesting. So all this was like theme analysis. My first year I did peer analysis. So there was about 300 students that would participate each year. But because students don't put their first name on the assessment, it's really hard to pair it that way. So the final pairing, meaning true matches, in my first year, I had 183, 168 in year 2, and then this past year, which is fall of 17, I had 274 because I learned, like, okay, you need to really write your name and then put something. And then we gave them markers to be able to identify so that we could better match them the third year round. So I try to bold this so that it's more visible. So if you just look at the pre, I know we're not all math numbers or math. These are just small changes, and you'll see, like, which ones were significant. Basically, on the bottom, it says that the overall finding was very significant on pre and post. So basically, each item from the CT assessment was number 1 had something to do with sequence, number 2 was sequence, and then algorithm was 3 and 4, and so forth. And so you could see from the pre-test what the students scored in from the 183 that were matched in their year 1, and then what they scored in from the post-test. Number 8, the loop question number 6, like loop question and 7, those are multi-item questions. So I think in the redesign of this we found out later that it's probably because it was a multi-step assessment and students had a hard time looping it because there was so much that you were asking in that question. So, you have to look at it and then better design the instrument for future collection periods. But overall, we saw gains from pre and post from the intervention. So these are from the second years. I just grouped it from sequencing, the 2 questions in sequencing algorithms. And again, the p-value on the bottom is what researchers really care about for quantitative. Is there a significance based on your pre and your post? And we found that there was a statistical significance from pretty much all the grouping of the concepts. Okay? And then now in year 3, which is what I just recently analyzed, is I separated again. We did a couple of the questions were very similar, but we added a technology questions to introduce, what is technology before we started exploring, because sequencing and algorithm, the concept. And so, again, the p-value, you can see they made changes. And 274 students that were paired. This is, so you could see that the intervention is working, right? So then I moved on to just a quick analysis of my STEM survey. There's lots of data. I could share with you all day long on all the data that I've been able to collect from the STEM survey, but I'm just going to highlight a couple pieces that I thought were really significant from what they're saying and what they believe of themselves, their self-concept, and the different influences of who has influenced them to participate in STEM either now or how they felt different subjects are important in their lives. So the overall perceptions from pre and post, again, you saw changes in there from the STEM survey. And then again, overall perceptions by gender. I split it up by gender from male and female. They were pretty much split evenly, but again, the pre and the post from left to right, you can see from gender, both male and female made gains. And then overall perceptions of STEM subjects, meaning I'm good at math and what I believe about math, et cetera, from pre and post. This is pre and post from the intervention. Also made changes. There were changes. Changes in STEM perception. So these were kind of grouped basically on self-concept, the pre and the post. I'm good with technology. Remember that question? I'm good at math, what they believe in themselves, and then learning. I learned technology quickly. I learned math quickly. So that's the second group that you see in the lighter green color. What do they think about learning these STEM subjects over time? And then, there was increases at the post. Now they're picking it up quicker. And excitement, pre and post. I'm excited when I'm learning about lessons that are fused with technology. I'm excited about math. And so pre and then post, there was some gains there. And then my peers influenced me, and then my parents from pre to post. My parents think learning about technology is important. So obviously the post is what we want to see growth from pre and post. This was actually a very interesting, I brought this in because I like this part. Before, they always filled out like what they want to be when they grow up at the pre, and then I took like all the different 132, you can't see that bottom number, but I think it's probably the screen. It was 132 clear matches that we could do on the STEM survey, and they filled out what they wanted to be when they grow up before any lessons were presented about STEM or coding or any kind of interdisciplinary content that was connected throughout the 10-week intervention. So there's a lot of STEM aspirations, or some, but there's more so later at the post, because researchers believe that the literature says that developmentally kids say what they think about what they want to do from jobs based on parents' experiences. The earlier they are, it's very fantasy-based. I want to be a princess. I had a kid who said, I want to be a mermaid catcher. And I said, well, tell me, what is that? So I get really excited. I was like, I didn't know there was a mermaid catcher. So tell me about what you want to be when a mermaid catcher. And so she starts telling me. So they tell you all these things at the pre, but then I came back, the survey also collected post-test responses. And there were some changes, like there was an increase from computer and technology. There was a +8, and then there was also an increase in engineering. And then some of the other ones kind of went down. But you can see that their aspirations did change only in one semester. So I guess if we collected evidence over time, we hope to see that there be more fostering and promotion of other STEM-related jobs and computer science technology jobs. Of course, I collected a bunch of interview data, and there's themes that happen out of the interview data, and then the interview data, not only from the interview data, from the written reflections that they were writing, the the flip books that they were keeping, and what they were learning and how it was connected. So all the qualitative data also came back, and there was importance of future job. Is what I'm learning in science important to my future job? So in the pre, using technology, some questions on the STEM surveys like using technology, they felt like being famous was really important at the beginning, but at the end, of course, the number went down. So, being famous is not so important in their future job, but rather it's, even making money, right, was really important for some of them. But then it went down, and then what went up was using technology became really important in my future job, using math and using these STEM subjects that I'm learning in school. Obviously, now I'm making the connection. This is now important in what I'm doing later, where I thought making a lot of money is what's going to make me happy, or whatever they thought. And then, obviously, in the interviews, they're saying, yeah, coding's connected, because one little girl said, she wanted to be an anesthesiologist, but the bottom line is, you can read her quote, but she really said the premise is she was afraid, because debugging became really important, because you learn about your mistakes and how to go back and correct it, because debugging was a concept we taught them. And she said, well, as an anesthesiologist, I can't give them the wrong dose. I have to go back, and keep fixing my errors. And so that was really resonated with her as like the powerful message in the concept of debugging that she felt was really important. And then following algorithms. As a scientist, obviously, I need to know what direction, not just getting up ready in the morning, but science is in my future job. I need to be able to know what I'm doing the right way and following the correct sequence and algorithm. Other things that happened was obviously just a natural recall. Remember, we always had, there was variations on what they were doing for formative assessment, but students predominantly either filled out a lesson recall or something they did. So there was a lot of recall and concepts that were important to them, because we were going through that circle, and then they got to apply it online. So they learned a lot about steps in the process. This is just a caption of all the data that I was able to get back from. There's a lot more. I have charts full of what they're saying after all the transcriptions. These are just themes. They learned loops. It's something you do over and over again. And then how is that connected in your everyday life? And so that was really important for us as far as feeling about this concept, like the idea of feeling and thinking, and is relative, because it's not just relative in the aspect of school and the space of school, but as you go home, remember, you told me that soccer is important because you like to do it. Do you see loops in soccer? And so that was like what we were trying to build and foster, that they see CT in everything that they do. It just wasn't at school from the minute that they enter the classrooms to the minute they leave. Like CT was happening in their space, and their brain was always working, and they were able to articulate that. Other themes was this idea of teamwork. So during the direct application of the online part with the code.org, we really required the students to be paired. A lot of schools had one-to-one bring devices, so kids had a one-to-one ratio. They could have their own Chromebook, but we really tried to encourage and focus on paired, so two people had to use one device. And that was really a philosophy of mine and a philosophy of code.org, because it was something that, you learn from collaboration, and you learn, there's already research, but the kids now were able to make those connections. And some teachers just wanted independent, one-on-one. They fought less because everybody wanted to drive. Everybody wanted to drive the puzzles nobody wanted to sit and be the navigator and say, no, you need to move that to the pig, to the angry bird, or however. Everybody wanted to move the blocks themselves. But when we force them to be in a paired mechanism, they're forced to teamwork, they're forced to collaborate, and they're forced to problem solve together. So the kids are saying, I like the part where we got to be with our friends. It's teaching me how to take turns and stuff. Last year I really didn't do a good job at taking turns. So they're learning these skills that we think are very powerful. They're gonna need to use it, these persistent and soft skills that are really important in any future job that they discover and do. And then again, the enjoyment of lessons. We have to make things exciting. It's more than just filling the STEM pipeline and encouraging. The point of when I started this intervention was really not to. We had 300 students who participated, and then now we've had over 1,000. Was not to create 1,000 coders. That was not my vision at all. It was really to get some access in there and to really allow them to have an opportunity to maybe explore something that they might not have had an experience, or to be able to, I think I could do that. I failed, but you learn from my mistake, and because there were these role models that were coming and teaching about computer science, that I could do that. This is not that hard. Here's some photos of students' work. I have a lot, but here are just some examples of some formative assessments that they were taking after each lesson. So I just wanted, it's very blurry, but exit tickets. So I had taught my pre-service teachers. They were the ones actually teaching these lessons. So they went through a curriculum class with me, and then we taught them how to teach some of these coding concepts. They went through training, and then weekly we supported them on the lesson refinement and the building of the lessons, and they were also learning strategies on presenting this topic to make sure it reaches all students. So vocabulary was really important, like how do you build literacy. So they were just doing an exit ticket and a foldable as far as how do you do learning a new vocabulary word and making sure it's relevant to you, drawing a picture. And then, some teachers opted to have just writing, coding and writing, and so they did that. So there was a lot of writing happening. Because kids think when they're writing. They're asked to think a lot when they're writing. So we did a lot of writing as additional formative assessment. And then, obviously I've gotten to my last part, which is in the context of the U.S., where are we headed? I'm sure New Zealand is also in this model of where are we headed now with CT and CS, digital technology and digital literacy. I think we're all in this, what do we do? The world is changing. It's a global economy. But under the context of the U.S., when CS for All came out this past year, when we say CS for all, who do we really mean? Is it just for secondary students? Is it just for men? Is it for, what do we really mean? So that's some implication discussion as far as where we think we're headed. And I do believe that if it's for all, then it really should benefit everybody, not just male or female. Everybody should have an opportunity, and that should be across the K-12 space, not just only in secondary. Because remember, it was already hugely saturated there. And there's now a little bit more momentum and a little bit more push for what's happening in the middle world and what's happening in the elementary world. And then is it CS or is it CT? We can't even figure out, do we want computer science or do we want CT? What is it that we really want? Do we want coding? Yeah, we know that CS is computer science. Coding is just an aspect of computer science. But what is our end result and our end goal? And so we're having conversations of that, obviously just not in the university that I'm at, but as far as national conversations on what do we really want when we say the CS AP course, right? Are we infusing CT in there, or we just want everybody to know how to do Java and Python and all of these textual languages so that they can go make a lot of money at Google? What is it that we're really wanting to teach in our curriculum? And then which environment? Do we wait? Which environment is best to promote it? Is it the classroom space? Is it an after-school environment? What environment? Is it a hybrid environment? And so those are conversations that are happening, and I'm sure, I probably would like to learn more on what's happening in the New Zealand world, but obviously in the context of U.S., we're toying with all of this. what is the curriculum? How do we foster that? Is it just completely, do we isolate it from all the STEM subjects? Do we embed it? What does it look like? So this is why all the K-12 standards are constantly getting revised to make it better and to make it follow and make sure that we do approach it more with an equity mind and very conscious of that. And then how do we assess? What evaluation instrument are we going to use? Are we all going to agree on that? Because we all know that evaluation and assessment can be very biased. And then obviously the big thing is teacher training. If teachers didn't sign up to teach computer science or coding, they signed up to teach math, right? And now you're expecting me to teach computational thinking. I don't have a background in it. So if it's a national curriculum, where does teacher training happen? And how do we support teachers who don't have the skills or the efficacy to go into the classroom and to think that they are confident enough to not just teach the subject of science, but interdisciplinarily weave it into the subject of science and make computational thinking as everything that they do. So that's basically my presentation. I'm going to leave the last 5, 10, 15 minutes.